Oh, no, it does look really good. It looks smooth.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with the thumbnail is just like it seemed so hard at first, and then by the time I got it done, it was great. And that's how we're gonna welcome you into tonight's episode of High Floor Football. My name is Sam Wagman. With me, as always, is JR himself. He's back to the Hawaiian shirts this week. And we're live to talk about some free agency predictions and some combine talk. Jay, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing well. The Hawaiian shirts never left, man. So I'm happy to keep rocking them through the shows, and I'm good. I'm good. Combine was fun. We got some new data points to work off of, and today was pretty interesting with all the free agency action, the franchise tags, the contracts, and Lamar Jackson, which I'm sure we'll talk about shortly.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, it's a little bit of a dry period in the NFL with all these teams, just trying to get the handle on rookies and free agents and all that stuff. So, with March 15th coming around, it's the start of a brand new league year. And it's really nice to kind of get to that point. It feels like we're really just jumping from the dry period between the Super Bowl to free agency. That whole month-long period is just like, well, what are we doing? So, we had the combine last week, and now we have free agency. But before we get into all of that, now's the best time to draft for the upcoming season on Underdog Fantasy. And we have a great way for you to get involved. You can sign up for Underdog Fantasy right now and get $100 match, 100% of your first deposit for free by using code HFF when you sign up for the first time. And the link will be in the description of the YouTube video. Just hop on down there below. And remember, use that code HFF to get a 100% match on your first deposit up to $100. So look, I mean, we had the NFL Combine. I mean, and that was a huge thing because the world got to see the one person that everyone's been waiting to see what he would do, and that's Bijan Robinson. So I mean, and I don't think we got disappointed at all. I mean, he really tested really well. He ran a 4.48 and did everything he needed to. What'd you think?
Yeah, I thought by no surprise, he did look great. Can't read too much into the combine, but there are things that are interesting, and just watching the running backs do all those passing drills too. I mean, he's just so natural with it. There was one, I mean, Daniel Jeremiah was talking through it live also, where it's like just the way that he like cradles the ball when he catches it. I mean, it's just like he's just so effortless with what he does. Ran pretty well for his size. He came in 215. Which was to be expected. But I mean, a lot of the other guys came in a lot smaller than we thought. So it was nice that Bijan came in at the size that we kind of expected him to be, maybe a little smaller, but not troubling. And yeah, I thought he crushed it. Jamar Gibbs had a pretty good combine, I would say. The size was a little bit concerning for some people, 199 instead of a little over 200. But I don't think people were expecting him to be too big. I think the Alvin Kamara comp took a little bit of a hit there because Alvin Kamara, weighed about 15, 20 pounds more than Jamar Gibbs did when he came out. And that's kind of the common comp between those two. So yeah, what did you think?
Yeah, I was, I wasn't impressed by any means with Bijan. I wasn't disappointed. Like you said, he did everything we thought he was going to do. We wanted him to test under 4.5 for his 40-yard dash, and he didn't disappoint. He had a next-gen stats score of 85, which was second best in his position group. So, for athleticism. So I like that. I like that he looked good catching the ball, and I think that he really just did everything that was expected of him, and he looked good during the media availability as well. So I'm good with that. For Gibbs, like I sometimes wonder what it looks like if you take the guys who weighed in at 199 and 201, like the the advanced stats of where they go between their drafted position and everything like that, like just where they go in the draft. Because I think that Gibbs weighing in at 199 kind of dings him a little bit because we wanted him to come in over 200 pounds. But at the same time, he looked very good. He ran a 4.36, and his hands were great during the passing drill, and he only dropped one ball. So I think he's going to be really good. I think he fits in that kind of role really well as a pass catcher. Kind of like a Tony Pollard type of vibe. Places like that. So I'm really excited to see what else is there, and then obviously, moving on from the running backs, we have to go to quarterbacks next. And it's impossible not to start with Anthony Richardson, who just took the entire combine by storm. Now, we knew this guy was going to be, pretty athletic, but did we know he was going to be that athletic? He was going to have a 10.0 RAS. Look, the comps to Cam Newton, Josh Allen was a popular one thrown out there by Orlovsky. Cam Jackson, a mix of Cam Newton and Lamar Jackson, all of those, kind of fit. But like Richardson really showed, and he looked, easy rhythm during the passing drills. Everything looked really good to me. Did anything stand out to you about Richardson that you didn't already know?
Well, yeah, I mean, the way he was, just in all those drills, I mean, he was historic. So, of course, it was really impressive. I would say that we all knew he was going to be a great athlete, but I mean, he was a historic athlete at the combine for his position. I did think during the throwing, it was just, I mean, another guy, I'm going to use the same word. It's just effortless, for him when he's throwing deep balls like that. I mean, they're just so on the money, so effortless. And he has some accuracy issues. So, that's something that, has shown up in games in college. It's shown up on tape, and I'm sure that's a detractor from him coming into the NFL too. That's something that we're all worried about because there needs to be some polish there. But I mean, just in terms of the traits and the skills, I mean, yeah, it's extremely impressive. It's impossible not to be impressed with him. And he really stole the show at the combine. I really don't think that it changed too much for really where he was being evaluated, in mock drafts and amongst the quarterbacks, among like the top four of them. I really thought he was going to be the third taken. I mean, he might be kind of in that competition now with, Stroud and Young for who's going to go 1 and 2. But I still think those two are the favorites, and he's a close third. But it was impressive. I mean, we were all in awe of what he did. But I almost don't want to like double ding him for that. It's like we knew he was this great athlete. We knew he was a freak athletically. So I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves with him. But I mean, we were all impressed for sure.
Yeah, before we move on to the wide receivers and tight ends, I do want to note, obviously, Richardson, has some footwork issues. Definitely showed that a little bit during the combine. We saw some inconsistency there. Bryce Young didn't do anything except for weigh in. He weighed in at 204. Can only imagine how many Chick-fil-A sandwiches that man ate before his weigh-in at the combine, because there's just no way he played above 200 at Alabama last year. But Stroud, I mean, I think Stroud just cemented that he's probably the most gifted thrower in this draft as far as accuracy and ball placement wise. Just looks so easy. And Daniel Jeremiah also said like that might be the best throwing session he's ever seen at the combine. Like nothing would shock me if Stroud just kept himself like that all the way through his draft process. So I don't know if I was impressed with anything that Stroud did. Kind of like Bijan, he went out there and did what he was supposed to do. So we're gonna see what happens there, and I do still think that Bryce and Stroud are both in the driver's seat for QB1 and QB2, but Richardson definitely closed the gap there. Moving on to the wide receivers. Again, we can only start with another Buckeye and Jackson Smith and Jigba. They both are wide receiver ones before and after this combine, and really just looked very good. Posted the best 20-yard shuttle time of any receiver since 2014, and it kind of this kind of reminds me of another wide receiver who came out of college really just as a slot guy, and here he is, showing that he can do more than just be a slot guy. Obviously, Justin Jefferson is on people's minds, and people are worried about the injury, but I just don't think any of that matters with JSN. He's just so athletically pure and naturally gifted at the position that I can't see anything else happening with him.
Yeah, I think it was more of just confirmation bias, the same sort of thing with JSN. I mean, it was, like you said, we both had him as our favorite wide receiver coming in. I mean, I tweeted out a couple days before he was actually the third favorite to be the first selected wide receiver
Yep.
behind Quentin Johnston and
And I
behind
took it right
Jordan
away.
Addison.
I
Yeah,
told you right then I was going right to take plus 350, I believe it was, and now it's down to plus 155.
Yeah, so I tweeted it out like 2 days before the combine, just kind of with the idea of if he does go and just kind of impress people the way that we thought he would. I expected him to run. I thought he was still going to run the 40 at that time, and when he pulled out, I was a little nervous because I thought, oh, okay, well now people are going to be a little bit more down on him. But I think he really confirmed what we all knew. I think he has a chance to be the first selected. He's still really not going as the first in a lot of big analyst mock drafts. I mean, it's still kind of with those top three with him, Addison, and Quentin Johnston, because I don't think Johnston did anything to hurt his stock either. I think he had a good combine as well. I'm sure we're going to, get to Jordan Addison, so I'll just kind of start on it because I have a little bit of a take on it. He had a bad combine. He didn't run as fast as we thought he was going to, especially for weighing in at 173. Just didn't test well all across the board, but I really don't think it's going to impact him too much. I think that we all get excited about the combine. We all are missing football for the first couple months, and we all have something to finally watch and analyze. But I don't think it's really going to hurt Jordan Addison at all. I still think he's going to be one of the top three wide receivers taken, regardless of that. I think we all kind of knew he's a little bit more quicker than fast, but again, we were disappointed with the 40 time and some other things for weighing 173. But, Devontae Smith paved the way for those type of guys. Now, hopefully Addison can run a little bit faster at his 40-day pro day and test a little better at his pro day. And again, I don't think it's really going to hurt him too much in terms of the draft.
Yeah, I definitely think that Addison had a little bit of a disappointing combine as well. And, kind of hope that he would run faster than a 4.55 was definitely very disappointed there. Josh Downs was another guy who I thought played really well. Obviously his speed is nothing to like scoff at either, 4.48 40, but he looked really good catching the ball. His size is going to turn some people off. He's 5'9". He's coming in, just over 170 pounds, but he fits as, a guy who can really, really play right away and at a high level there. I'm thinking like a Hunter Renfrow type of guy coming out of college who's just really smart between the ears. And I think his footwork is terrific. So I really like that. Tank Dell was a guy who had a lot of buzz coming into the combine as well off a strong Senior Bowl. Only 165 pounds and only around a 4.49 there. But I think his route running is really good. But is there anyone else in the wide receiver class you had an eye on?
Well, before the combine, I had my eye on Kayshon Boutte. I thought he was going to have a better showing there, so it was a little bit disappointing. I'm really kind of conflicted where to go on that. Yeah, they should start calling him 40 days. We got a comment there. Yeah, I was everyone was disappointed with the way he worked out with the explosion. I mean, he just didn't really have it. There were some people on Twitter, some critiquing how the 40 was measured and saying, maybe he, hit different top speeds in it, didn't really, run the whole thing too fast. But, I still liked what I saw from him. I still think he's a good player. I'm just interested to see where he's going to go in the draft because I do think that's going to hurt a little bit unless he can elevate those numbers at his 40-day or pro day, whatever we're going to call it going forward. So I was a little disappointed with him, but yeah, I think that overall we'll see where he goes in the draft.
Yeah, definitely some other guys that had decent days like Jake Bobo out of UCLA, Zay Flowers. We touched on Quentin Johnston, Yoshivas from Princeton. That he's going to be interesting there. Ran a nice under 4.40 as well.
Marvin Mims had a good.
Oh
day
yeah,
too.
he did too. 4.38 in the 40. Definitely looked like a guy who's rising up my ranks and someone I really liked out of Oklahoma for the past couple of years there. Want to get to tight end real quick before we jump into the free agent class. And obviously we got to start with the alien who just dominated both weigh-ins and drills and just about everything else. Had a nasty one-handed catch as well. That's Darnell Washington, who literally made pushing a blocking sled. Now, I've never pushed a blocking sled in my life. I was always too short to play football. I don't know about yourself, but from what I've seen, pushing a blocking sled is not easy. Those things are pretty heavy. And this man just pushed it with ease 15, 20 yards down the field. Like, he is a literal alien out there. That's Darnell Washington coming in at 6'7", 264. And he described himself as the most unique tight end in the draft. I don't think he's wrong. He ran the fourth fastest 40 time by a tight end at 4.64 and posted the second longest broad jump, 10'2", by any tight end weighing 260 plus pounds since 2003. And then he just looked so good. He can catch the ball, looked really good with that. And look, I mean, Darnell Washington, if anybody, I don't know if any tight end did anything more for his draft stock than Washington did. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear take, but I mean, he just feels like such a Raven. They're going to find a way to get Darnell Washington on their team.
Another one. They're going to draft like 2 more this year, probably.
Some way, man. I mean, he just feels like that. But yeah, I mean, I thought the tight ends were impressive. We all kind of knew that as well for, the weeks leading up. We've been getting told this is the best tight end class in the past couple of years, and it's deep and there's, full of talent. So, it's tough for fantasy to get too excited about some of these rookie tight ends sometimes, in dynasty leagues. Invest in them and, kind of wait a couple of years to see what they can do. But, it's tough for them to produce right away in the NFL. But I think this is a really good class, and I think they proved that they're a really good class.
Yeah, absolutely. Other guys out there, Sam Laporta from Iowa, tight end university, a guy who's a pretty good route runner, was literally the only source of offense that Iowa's had in the last 2 to 3 years because they've just been a trash dumpster fire. But, I mean, he's 6'3", 245, so he's small for the position. But he did run a 4.59, had a good broad jump and a good vertical. And look, he's very experienced at the position. And, obviously tight ends don't need huge athletic profiles to be successful. They really just need to learn the intricacies of the position. And I think Laporta's a very smart guy. He's going to be able to do that real quickly. Michael Mayer's up there as well. Guy, they used to call him Baby Gronk, coming in. He's my tight end one. Seems to be an unpopular opinion these days, but I definitely think he helped himself by being able to test while Dalton Kincaid could not due to injury. And I'll be really interested to see what Dalton Kincaid does at his pro day next month. But Mayer definitely up there. Ran a little bit of a disappointing 40 at 4.7. But I do think Michael Mayer's like a Zach Ertz type where you can just be peppered with a ton of targets and get you where you need to go, be a solid red zone guy. Anybody else catch your eye before we move on from here?
No, I'm ready to move on to free agency. Let's talk about some of these guys.
Let's do it. And obviously, moving on to free agency, we got to start with the most important story today. Lamar Jackson got the non-exclusive franchise tag placed on him by the Ravens. And we were talking about this a little bit pre-show. We have a little bit of differing opinions. I think the fact that all these teams coming out right away and saying that they're not interested and won't be pursuing Lamar is absolute, just trash. It's first of all, it just shows. I don't know if it shows ignorance. I think it's more of like a calculated move to, say, we're not going to show that we're interested so we can kind of negotiate without pressure of other teams coming in. I also think that this is a guy who won an MVP 3 years ago. He's shown that when, he's on and he's good to go, that he's one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. And it's so hard to find a quarterback that's not just average to below average at playing the position that someone like Lamar is going to get paid a ton of money. It's just by which team. But you had a differing opinion on that, so let's hear it.
Well, I'm a huge Lamar fan. I have been for a long time. I'm a big fan. And, I want the best for him. And I think Baltimore knew what was going to happen a little bit today. I think they kind of had an idea that, leading up to this, I guess I'll start there. When I had heard about that, they were going to place this sort of tag on him, I thought that's ridiculous. If a team could get out there and essentially send an offer to get Lamar and only have to spend 2 first-round picks to do it, and of course the massive contract that it's going to take to acquire him. But two first-round picks and compensation for Lamar Jackson is, chump change to me. I mean, that's not much for a guy like him. So that was a little crazy to me that Baltimore was even doing that and was even going to give teams the option of doing that. But thinking back on it and kind of seeing how it all unfolded today, I think Baltimore knew exactly what was going to happen. I think they knew that a lot of these teams were actually not going to be able to, or be, scared to do that. They're not going to have to. They're not going to be able to put out that money right away. And I think that realistically, the Browns kind of screwed everybody because the Browns were completely irresponsible with the deal they gave Deshaun Watson. And to give it to Deshaun Watson, of all people, I think makes it a lot tougher for when teams have to explain. And again, Lamar Jackson, I actually was going to put my name for the show as Lamar Jackson's agent, but we have the names underneath here already. But I love Lamar, and I wish he did have an agent. I think it's cool that he was trying to figure this out on his own, but I really think that hurt him because if he had an agent, I think that he would have had a little bit better idea of what the market was going to be like when this did happen. Like I said, Browns were completely irresponsible giving Deshaun Watson that contract, and it's a really tough situation for the Baltimore front office, DaCosta, whoever's talking to him, the GM, whoever else, to have to tell Lamar that, he's not worth what Deshaun Watson got. How does that really make sense? Lamar Jackson's an MVP. He didn't, he's not being, allegedly accused of, sexual assault, all these different things. He's just been a better, more successful player in the NFL than Deshaun Watson was, better guy. So I really think that when the Ravens have to explain that to Lamar, that, you're not worth that, it comes off a little bit differently, than if they were explaining that to his agent, who then's relaying that to Lamar, because, it makes sense financially that it's tough to give these guys a $230 million fully guaranteed contract. But once you do it once, I think that, these guys have every reason. Lamar Jackson has every reason to think that that's what he's worth. And he is, based on Deshaun Watson getting it. So I think that a little bit of, I don't want to use the word collusion necessarily, but yeah, I think some of the owners were on the same page of like, we don't want this to be the precedent going forward. We don't want to send, $230 million fully guaranteed contract. And then the next quarterback that comes up is going to want that. The next quarterback that comes up is going to want that. So I think this was a little bit of hardball. And I hate that Lamar Jackson had to kind of be the guinea pig in this sort of situation, to be the next guy after Deshaun Watson, to have to learn that the Browns just made a terrible financial decision and an irresponsible financial decision. So I don't really like to use the word collusion with anything like that, but I do think this was understood amongst the league what was going to happen.
Yeah, I definitely think, and without going too far into this in the interest of time, because I think we can do this entire show just talking about what this means for Lamar Jackson and stuff like that. But I do want to say that Lamar is much more accomplished than some of these other guys that have gotten contracts like this. Honestly, I think he's had a better career than Deshaun Watson thus far. I think he's done much more with less than Watson did. And the one I wanted to look at was Kyler Murray's contract. Kyler Murray's done absolutely nothing, to warrant the contract that he just received. And that's $230 million with 189 of it guaranteed. And he's done nothing. He doesn't have a playoff win. He doesn't have a 500 record. He's done nothing to deserve that. And I think that Lamar looking at that and saying, this guy can get this. And, Aaron Rodgers, who's 38 and considers retiring and darkness retreats every year, gets what he got. And obviously Deshaun Watson gets what he got. I just think that it's so, borderline unprofessional for these owners to go out there and say, we just don't want to set this bad precedent of giving these guys so much money and so much of it guaranteed. But the NFL. So, go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say that's just where the difference is. I honestly think, and correct me if I'm wrong, or I think that, Baltimore, I think plenty of other teams would actually give Lamar Jackson a Kyler Murray type contract. He doesn't want that. He wants a Deshaun Watson type contract, which is, it's a lot more guaranteed money. It's fully guaranteed. And that is a wild thing. I think the NFL just doesn't want to go down that path of having these guys being fully guaranteed. That's just never the way that they've done it. And that the Browns went out on a limb like that and gave Deshaun Watson that was very unique. It was an outlier, but now that it's been done, it's tough to tell some of these better quarterbacks, like you said, Lamar Jackson, who's more accomplished, who's been a better player, that he's not worth what Deshaun Watson got.
Yep. In the interest of time, I do want to move on. I do plan to come back at the end of the show and talk a little bit about Lamar and what we think happens with that, because I think that's a better way to end this show is to do that. But I want to go on to the next one who got signed off this list, and that's obviously Derek Carr, who was signed a few days ago by the Saints to a $150 million deal over 4 years. And what do we think of that deal? What do we think? Do we think he's well? First of all, obviously Derek Carr got released from the Raiders after the two sides mutually agreed to split ways. Do we think he was worth the $35 million a year that he got, or $37.5 million a year that he got?
I think it depends what you're looking for, to be honest. Would I have done that if I was, a GM or leading a team? No, because I just think, I saw a tweet yesterday, somebody can look it up afterwards or something from that, what's his name? Bulletproof Bean Counter. He was talking about it a little bit, and you either go all in or you don't in the NFL. That's really like how it should be, because these contracts are so big for these quarterbacks. And to be honest, does anybody think that Derek Carr and the New Orleans Saints are going to win a Super Bowl during this time? I don't think so.
No.
I don't think anybody would put money on that. They might win the division. That's a pretty, wide open division. And I think Derek Carr does right now make the Saints probably the best team in that division. But, that's not saying too much. I really think, the Saints don't do that. The Saints don't fully rebuild. That's not the way that, their GM works. That's not the way their organization works. So they kind of took a short-term route to stay relevant, which I think is Derek Carr, but I don't think that's going to ever, lead them to the promised land that they ultimately are going to want to go to. So, yeah, no, I don't think Derek Carr is worth it necessarily. And I think he's kind of in that, slightly below, he's in that like average range of quarterbacks. And I think that, at this pace, I'd rather be drafting a guy and resetting the quarterback schedule than having Derek Carr for the next 4 years and, getting out in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I feel like Carr is going to go back to being I think we probably jumped the gun last year, overread way too much into Devontae Adams. Even myself, I thought Carr was going to be like a top 10, top 9 option in fantasy. And I think he kind of goes back to being that like top 15 level guy where he's dependable. He's not going to do anything crazy, especially in New Orleans. They have Chris Olave. But outside of that, there's not really much dependable. Alvin Kamara is probably going to get suspended for at least 6 games. I wouldn't be shocked if he's suspended for more. Michael Thomas is, well, we just don't know at this point. So, and outside of that, there's just no one else there. So it'll be really interesting to see. Oh, there's Rashid Shaheed, who is there. My DFS nemesis from the end of last year. But we'll see what happens with Carr. I definitely think he goes back to being like a top 15 option. Is that where you'd probably put him?
Yeah, sure. I think in fantasy, about a top 15 option. I think it helps Olave, because I do think that he's better than the alternatives that were there. He's better than who was there last year, and so I do think it's a bump for Olave. But just for the Saints in general, yeah, I think it was a interesting move, but kind of a move they felt like they had to make.
All right, moving right along. Let's get to the next guy who got a contract today or yesterday, and that is Geno Smith. He didn't write back, and he ended up signing a big contract for 3 years, $105 million. Pretty much turns out to be a 1-year contract that the Seahawks can get out of after this season. So it sets him up to be a really good bridge, and then for him to move on. If they presumably either draft their quarterback of the future in this year's draft or next year's draft, and probably more likely next year than this year. But what do we think about that? I mean, I really like this deal. I thought Geno fit really well in Seattle. Career highs in pretty much every foreseeable category there, and really looked good at times. What do you think? I know you're a big Geno fan, so.
I'm not a big Geno fan. I actually think they're drafting a quarterback at 5 as well.
Sarcasm.
Good for. Yeah, I'm not a Geno fan. I mean, good for him. I think it was really cool to see his career arc come back like this and him get this big contract. It really was. He seems like a good guy. I think it's fine for the fantasy value. I don't really think it changes much. He did have a great year last year, and he was perfectly able to support the surrounding cast in Seattle. I do different than you think that they are going to draft a quarterback at 5 personally. And I think it's a great situation for that. I think that a lot of good teams, especially when you have 2 picks like Seattle does, you try and take advantage of that. It's a luxury. So if you're sitting in the top 5 and, look at Seattle, they were pretty good last year. They made the playoffs. So you're hoping that you're not going to be back in the top 5. So I think that you use that pick to draft a quarterback this year. Like you said, Gino's contract isn't as long as it might seem. So I think that, you have a nice plan B as well. And, I think that, bringing back Gino is a good move, but I think they'll still add a quarterback and still, no change really in the Seattle passing game. I think that,
Yeah. Yeah, and I do think there's a decent chance that they actually go and get a new receiver as well. With Lockett getting up there in age as well, so it'll be really interesting to see what they do in the draft, because I know Schneider is never afraid to shy away from making splashes offensively. He did it last year with Kenneth Walker. He's done it, with DK obviously. And I do think that we see Seattle really make a push, because look, they stuck into the playoffs last year. They could see themselves as a borderline contending team in a very weak NFC. So I really think that there's a chance that they push the envelope and really go for it this year. And that's a big reason why they brought Gino back on this kind of structured deal that sets them up to compete and also for the future at the exact same time. So I'm there for that. I think Gino's definitely a guy that can slide into that top 15 as well. We saw him use his legs at times last year, and I think that there's a good chance that he plays pretty well there. We only really have one more guy to talk about, since I don't think either of us want to talk about Baker Mayfield. We're going to talk about Jimmy Garoppolo, and he's the one guy who isn't currently with the team right now. And my feeling is that he's tailor-made for a situation like the Raiders. And I think that's kind of the general consensus that's been going around. Another team kind of feel like the Falcons are a possibility there, despite the fact that I think their young talent makes them want to go a little bit younger in the draft there. What do you think about Jimmy Garoppolo? Where could we see him land, and what kind of fantasy aspect could we see from him?
Yeah, well, I think the Raiders is an interesting fit. I think that's kind of going to be one of the top options for him, as well as the Jets if they do miss out on Rodgers. If this thing doesn't work out, I think that Jimmy's kind of a good backup plan for them, and I think they know that they'll be able to get him a little bit cheaper, and that it's still going to be better than who they were working with last year. And I'll give a little dynasty spin on it with Garoppolo, and I've kind of been on this since last year as well. I think that typically in dynasty, sometimes people are late because they're waiting for something to happen that we kind of already know is going to happen. I think if you polled it, a high percentage would say Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be starting somewhere next year. But you can get him as like the last possible starter in dynasty drafts. I'm going to start up right now. I got us my QB3 in like the 11th round, and because people right now are saying, well, they can't really picture it. They're like, where's he going to be? Where's he going to be? We know he's going to be somewhere. At least I think he's going to be somewhere. And so I think he's actually a really good buy right now in dynasty, because you can get him a little bit cheaper before he actually is, on that team officially. So I think he will be starting. The Raiders is a good option, like I said, or the Jets. I'm a little surprised that Tampa isn't, involved on him at all. I kind of thought that they would be at the beginning of the offseason, but now I'm thinking they're just going full tank and just kind of, tank for Caleb mode. But I really thought that Jimmy would have been a good fit there as well. So dynasty wise, like I said, goodbye time for Gino. For Jimmy, the window is wide open.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the thing that, this is something we're doing year after year with Jimmy at this point. I did it all last year too. I'm like, don't be surprised if he ends up starting for the 49ers at some point, whether it's out of necessity or not. He's a relatively safe option for that team. And that's just the thing with this guy. He's never gonna overpower anybody, but he gets the job done. He's got a very high football IQ. He learned from Tom Brady for years. He learned from Bill Belichick for years. And then he learned from Kyle Shanahan for years. So he's got a very high football IQ, and he's going to be able to pick up your offense and really get the ball, get it done for you. For what you need to do. And when you have someone like Devontae Adams who can really take over a game, I feel like the Raiders profile is just such a good spot for him, because he can go in there and immediately be a QB2 that you can feel good about starting, and he'll get you 15 to 18 points a game, like that. So I think that Jimmy is a guy that kind of goes overlooked. Obviously, everyone wants the shiny object. They want to talk about Daniel Jones. They want to talk a lot Lamar, Derek Carr, this and that. But Jimmy is like that old reliable. He's going to be there for you. He's going to get you. He's going to get you where you need to go. He's never going to be the fastest guy. He's never going to be the flashiest guy, but he'll get the ball to you, and he'll make some mistakes. He'll make some boneheaded plays. But generally he does what you need to do at an average level.
Yeah.
So, I said I didn't want to talk about Baker. I really don't know if there's a starting job for Baker. So before we move on to running backs, do you think that there is a starting job in the cards for Baker Mayfield this offseason?
The only one that I can really see, and I asked you before as well, I think it was a good piece, and so I'll shout it out to anybody else. Matthew Berry put out a good article yesterday called his 23 most interesting things he learned at the combine, and there was one quote in there pretty much saying that Matthew Stafford could hardly throw the ball last season, and that there's still a chance that he could retire. And that was a little nugget that Berry was trying to put out there, and I think that is really interesting because there has been rumors that Baker wants, or that the Rams are interested in retaining Baker, bringing him back. And I think that is really interesting because Matthew Stafford, I believe it was a couple weeks ago or kind of before the end of the season, said that he was going to be back next year. But I mean, if he's really not healthy and, some of the injuries that he's dealt with and just like, is it really worth it? And so I think if Baker's back there, there's I hate to, call Stafford injury prone or anything. He's just dealt with some serious injuries. So if he does miss some time, I think Baker's got some value there for sure.
Yeah, I think that's interesting as well. I mean, I said it as well. I think Stafford is a prime retirement candidate. He's made a ton of money. He won a Super Bowl. His wife just got over having brain cancer. There's a lot of reasons why Stafford could choose to step back. I also think Tampa is an option. There's no way they're sold on Kyle Trask, no matter how much I tell Jason that Kyle Trask is a god and he'll be a great NFL quarterback if you just give him a chance. I swear to God, I told him that. Just kidding. But I think that there's definitely an option. I mean, Tampa just doesn't really feel like the type of place that Baker would want to go, because I think Baker wants to go to a place where he has a chance to win. And I just don't know if Tampa is in that frame of mind. I think that Tampa basically has told the entire NFL without saying it I'm
with our buddy Derek here in the comments, man. For anybody who's going to listen to this in the podcast form, Trask is fucking terrible. I don't care about the language part of it either. Thanks, Derek. Thank you for coming in here and straightening things out before I had to. But yeah, I mean, I think there's so many interesting fits for Tampa, but Tampa really has to make a decision. I feel like if they are going to go with Kyle Trask and they are going to just let this season ultimately fade away, figure out what you're doing with Mike Evans. Figure out what you're doing with Chris Godwin. I mean, there's no way they keep these guys and go full rebuild.
I mean, they just gave Godwin
there's
that
no
huge
way
contract.
they cannot put us through the pain of watching Chris Godwin and Mike Evans have to deal with your boy Kyle Trask. No thank you for that. Let's move on to the running backs on that note.
Yes. Yeah. So absolutely. And I do agree that Kadarius Toney and Kyle Pitts played a huge part in getting Kyle Trask drafted. But I guarantee if you just give him a shot, he'll be serviceable. But anyways, we'll start out with the guys who got tagged, and start out with the guy who probably didn't want to get tagged at all and really deserved a longer term contract. That's Saquon Barkley, and I can't help but think that the Giants kind of just got stuck here and didn't really have a choice. Obviously, we pass over because Daniel Jones wasn't technically a free agent. He received a 4-year, $160 million deal with $92 million of it guaranteed. Huge number, by the way. Go Giants. Smart move, everyone. But the unfortunate part of that is that Saquon Barkley received the franchise tag, and it was the non-exclusive franchise tag, which, like Lamar, enables teams to come and give Saquon an offer, which the Giants can choose to match or give him up and receive the 2 first-round picks. So that's a possibility. Saquon received this tag. Doesn't seem like he was happy about it from what people around the league have said, and kind of creates a weird scenario there, because it all but guarantees he's gone next year. given that it seems like they couldn't work out a deal with him before the deadline. And it begs the question of, how do you value Saquon? Obviously we value Saquon as a top tier running back in redrafts, but how do we look at him in dynasty leagues? And that's kind of how I'm feeling. So how are you valuing Saquon as a dynasty asset at this point in time?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it last week as well. I think that Saquon's still, firmly one of the top backs. I mean, I think that, I'm kind of a, ageist when it comes to dynasties, as you know, and especially with the running back position. So there is that aspect to it. But I mean, I think him going back to the Giants actually isn't a bad thing for his dynasty value at all. I mean, they kind of built their offense around Saquon. They used him a ton. I didn't know that he had gotten that type of franchise tag. I thought he just got the normal one. We have Derek in the comments here saying he's a sell. Yeah, I mean, I think pretty much any running back at that age could be a sell depending what you can get for them. But just in terms of him going elsewhere or being in New York, I really don't think that it's that bad of a situation for him there. Derek saying sell, sell, sell. Yeah, man, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I do think Saquon's still one of the top running backs in Dynasty based on when you bake in that age aspect to it. I tend to stay younger for the running backs as well. So yeah, if you can sell Saquon for a good amount, I mean, you can probably get a pretty high pick for him as well. So I think I'm going back to Giants though is not necessarily a bad thing. I'd be surprised if he doesn't hold out and try and figure out something else with them, because like you said, he's not too happy on that franchise tag, it being, what is it, $10.8 million. So I don't blame him for not being happy about that. I feel the same with Josh Jacobs. I think he's also going to still try and work with the Raiders and try and figure out some sort of long-term deal. But yeah, man, it was interesting news. I mean, on our last show, that was kind of my thought, that they were going to sign Daniel Jones long-term and just tag Saquon. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of running backs have to deal with these days.
Yeah, and it was also big news over the past few weeks that the Raiders plan to franchise tag Josh Jacobs after trying to sign him to a deal last offseason and trying to sign him to a deal this offseason and, unable to. So they hammered out the franchise tag. And obviously, even though the tag was only $2 million more than his fifth-year option, I still think it kind of showed that they didn't really they probably should have just done it last offseason and picked up the option, gotten a deal done with him. And I think it would have made things a lot easier, because I do think this team is just not going to be able to work out a long-term deal with Jacobs as well there. So going into Jacobs, I picked up this very interesting tweet from John Daigle. 5 running backs have registered 390 plus touches in a single season over the last 10 years. And their usage the following years is as follows. Christian McCaffrey, 76 touches in 3 games. Derrick Henry, 237 touches in 8 games. DeMarco Murray, 237 touches in 15 games. Goddamn the Eagles. And Le'Veon Bell, holdout, 311 touches the previous year. So not all great things to see there when you're looking at Josh Jacobs after this humongous touches year. And I touched on it last week as well. When we were looking at, Jacobs in the risers and fallers, is just that, I don't know, he's never handled that much of a heavy workload. And the whole thing coming into the NFL was that he wasn't heavily used at Alabama, which enabled him to really, get that high workload. And it kind of worries me to think about what could happen with Jacobs. And I think people are really, really buying into him this year. I've seen him drafted RB4, RB5, RB6 in some places in dynasty leagues and even in best ball leagues. And that, tell you the truth, that worries me. That means you're just buying at the absolute ceiling of a guy that, is coming off a career high in touches and is at elevated risk of something happening to him, And, we talk about running these running backs into the ground. Well, the ground could be fast approaching for Josh Jacobs. And that worries me, despite the fact that the Raiders could still be an efficient offense this year.
Yeah, he's going off the board in Underdog drafts at about RB10, in between about Nick Chubb and Travis Etienne. So risky range there anyway for him. But yeah, I mean, I agree with pretty much what you said as well.
Yeah. All right. So moving right along, and to end that, I not at the price that he's coming off the board right now, and you definitely need to be wary of what we see there. Last of the guys that got tagged, Tony Pollard, and look, we can depend on Jerry Jones all we want. That man will make stupid decisions till the day he dies. He's paying $27 million to running backs this year. Man, between the Giants, the Commanders, and the Cowboys doing stupid things all at once, like the Eagles are just in the best position they've been in for the division in years, right? It feels so great. I want to go back to this question that Ryan just asked. Don't think he's had the opportunity to have this sort of workload in prior years regarding Jacobs due to injuries earlier in the year. He's played through it, but they had to monitor it. And yeah, those little nicks and injuries are exactly the type of thing I'm worried about. Those are things could be small with the smaller workload, but as he gets banged up more and more and more, those injuries have a higher chance of causing him to miss, more and more time. So, that just worries me a ton there. Going back to Pollard, like, look, we love him, but I think it's clear that Jerry still wants to have Ezekiel Elliott on the roster. So and Pollard's going to be coming off a fracture. So my question to you is this: do we see Pollard put up another RB1 season this coming year, or does he return to more of the complimentary back that he's been so far in his career, despite the fact that he's got the franchise tag on him?
Well, yeah, and just a reference to where he's going right now in early drafts. I mean, he's being drafted as a top 15 running back, RB13. I don't know if he's necessarily going to be able to replicate it. I think that the Cowboys are just such a interesting franchise in the way that they do a lot of these things. So it's tough to really tell what's going to happen with Ezekiel Elliott, because I think as much as we all think they should move on, they should cut him. I just don't think they're going to. So I think
Derek thinks he's an RB1.
Yeah, I think Tony Pollard's got that in his range of outcomes for sure. He's going right, like I said, right after that at RB13. So I think that range is totally fair for him. He's going in between Ramondre Stevenson and Najee Harris, and I prefer him over Najee Harris. I think I'd still take Ramondre Stevenson over Tony Pollard, but I think that range is fair. So I think being drafted as that borderline RB1 is definitely fair for him coming back.
Convert Zeke to fullback. I love that. He basically runs at the level of a fullback. I've never seen somebody get over 60 carries and then get 100 yards, 1.7 yards per carry. I saw that the other day, 60 something carries for 100 yards and a touchdown in the last, I believe it was 6 games of the season. Is that a wild stat or what? That's legitimate, like fullback, like QB sneak numbers. Jalen Hurts could get better on 60 QB sneaks than Zeke could there. He needs to call a doctor because it's lasting longer than 48 hours. I love that. I don't know what to think about Pollard. I'm waiting to pass judgment until we get another update on his ankle. I think he'll be ready. I don't know exactly how good he's going to look right away. It'll be interesting to see. But if he's there for me, he's definitely a top 15 guy for me. I think it's closer. I think it's just closer to that 15 number than it is to the RB, top 10 range for me. Mm-hmm. All right, moving right along to who is probably now the best running back in this free agency class that has not been tagged, and that is our own Miles Sanders. Coming off a career best year, rushing for over 1,100 yards, 11 touchdowns, frighteningly 0 usage in the passing game. As a result of Kenny Gainwell pretty much handling that role, and as well as Boston Scott, most of the time. What kind of market do we see for Miles Sanders? It's the first running back we get to talk about who actually has a market. Now, where could Miles Sanders land?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. I think we were both on the same page that the Eagles weren't going to bring him back as much as Miles pleaded the Eagles to bring him back. Sad. It seems like a very nice guy and seemed like he wanted to be in Philadelphia, but it's just smart to let that go. I'll reference it again, Matthew Berry's piece that he put out again on the things that he learned at the Combine. He had a nugget there pretty much saying that the Eagles didn't necessarily want to have a running back by committee, but they just didn't really trust Miles Sanders enough to have him carry that sort of workload. So I think that that's probably the consensus around the league as well. I mean, I talked about it on our Super Bowl show right after. I mean, Miles Sanders' first carry at the Super Bowl, he fumbled the ball out of bounds. There are trust issues with some of the things that Miles Sanders does. He's a home run hitter, though. He's a guy that if there is that hole, he can break away. He can make a big play. He's got the juice to do that. But I don't think it's going to be a really robust market for him. One of the teams that I really am kind of interested in that I think he could end up on is Miami. If Miami strikes out on some other options, if Miami doesn't go to the draft to find their running back, I could see Miles Sanders end up somewhere like that. That's one of the main options for me. Maybe the Panthers, if they don't bring back Dante Foreman and they can get Miles Sanders at a cheaper price with Deuce Staley there now, I could see that being a connection. But yeah, I don't think the market's going to be too robust. I feel like him and David Montgomery are kind of in the same situation where they're probably going to have to take what they can get, and they're probably going to be splitting work wherever they go, and it's going to be tough for fantasy because, like you just said with Miles Sanders, I mean, after his rookie season, at the end of it at least, we thought Miles Sanders was going to be more of a receiving back. We thought he was going to really have that profile, and that has really tailed off the last couple of years of his career.
Yeah, and I definitely agree there, and I view David Montgomery the same way as you. They're both RB2s. I think Sanders has a little bit more upside because he's a little bit more explosive. Montgomery is more of a plotter, and I don't think Montgomery is efficient at all. I've never been much of a Montgomery fan. I do think that whatever kind of market Miles Sanders has, Montgomery has a similar but a little bit of a lesser market. I want to touch on Jamal Williams, who just led the NFL in rushing touchdowns as well. 17 rushing touchdowns, 1,066 yards on 262 carries. I mean, he's a huge part of why the Lions were able to really kind of exceed expectations in 2022. And he broke Barry Sanders' franchise rushing TD record. And, obviously in a contract year, there's no better thing than breaking some legendary people's records. What kind of market do we think that Jamal Williams has? Does he go back to Detroit? What kind of thing do we see there?
Yeah, that's what I think. I think he goes back to Detroit. So I don't really think the market's that robust for him either in terms of other teams. I feel like Jamal Williams kind of found himself in a situation where he's most valuable to Detroit. They're the team that really knows his value, was able to use him in a good way. I think that they were saying some interesting things about DeAndre Swift. They're going to start over with him, see how they can use him. I really think that's a good combo. I think if they can figure out more ways to get DeAndre Swift on the field, feel more comfortable with him, I think that him and Jamal Williams is a very fun duo. And I think the Lions have so many other things to, figure out that, and they're a good team in their own right. I'm just saying, mostly defensively. I think if you bring back Jamal Williams, that's a hole that you don't really have to fill. They have a good run game with him and DeAndre Swift. And I think that he wants to go back as well. I mean, the guy looked like he had the, time of his life for Detroit last year, all through Hard Knocks, all through the end of the season. So I think there's mutual interest is what I've seen. And I think that that's ultimately where he ends up.
Yep. One of the last guys I really want to touch on before we get to the wide receivers and tight ends that are very small class there, Kareem Hunt. And we've seen the whole spectrum from Kareem Hunt. We saw him put up RB1 overall level seasons in Kansas City. We saw his downfall, obviously, with the videos that came out, got traded to the Browns. And then we've seen his role very much diminish over the past couple of seasons in the Browns offense. Obviously sitting behind Nick Chubb, being his 1B/2A to Nick Chubb's clear 1A there. What kind of upside does Kareem Hunt still have after suffering a multitude of injuries over the last 2 years? Because for me, I don't see much of an upside with Hunt at all anymore. I don't know if he's any more than a rotational back. He's 28 now. For me, I just don't know if there's a team that's willing to pay him anything more than a backup role at this point.
No, I think really the interesting kind of narrative as well with this running back class, as much as we're going to talk about it because it is happening, free agency is happening. It's an interesting thing to talk about. This running back draft class that's coming in is just so deep too, filled with so much talent that I really think it's impacting guys like Miles Sanders, David Montgomery, Kareem Hunt. These guys that are getting up in age a little bit. Miles Sanders, Montgomery are younger than Kareem. But still, they've got some tread on their tires. They've had some injuries in the past. There's been different things with them. And I think that there's such a deep running back class that for fantasy, I really think that it's going to hurt some of those guys, because I think even on the teams that do sign them ultimately to whatever deals they get, that's not going to rule out, a day 3 running back coming in there, a day 2 running back coming in there as well. And I think Kareem Hunt's kind of settled in to that point in his career where, a team that I was kind of thinking with him would be maybe if he could end up somewhere like Atlanta, but he's not going to be the only guy there, so it'll be him and 2 to 3, 2 other guys or so, a 3-headed monster in their backfield. And it won't be a bad football fit necessarily, but I think it would be a tough fantasy fit.
Yep, absolutely. And the last guy I want to touch on before we move on is Devin Singletary, who, he played the role that he was dealt in Buffalo, and he really didn't get a lot of room to thrive there over the past few years, and that's not a detriment to him. I think he played really well, and he averaged just under 5 yards a carry last season. I really think that in the right offense, Singletary is a really solid dual threat guy who probably thrives very well. In the right offense. I mean, he can catch passes. He plays low with a low center of gravity, and I just wonder if there's a true place that he can thrive. My feeling is someplace like maybe like a Carolina, something like that. But what's your vibe on Devin Singletary? I know you're not as big a fan of him as I am, but
yeah, I think he's fine. I think that, kind of when you go down the list of these running backs, though, these guys that are available, he's not one of the more appealing names to me, but he is somebody who, has value.
He's a rotational piece. He's
definitely played well. He's played better than he gets credit for. I will say that. I think, a team like, again, it's going to be cheap. So I don't really know. I mean, a team like Jacksonville would be something that I could think maybe just goes back to Buffalo. Who did you just name? It was the Carolina. I could see, Deuce Staley's been pretty open about he wants to use, a whole stable of running backs. And I think Devin Singletary fits well in that sort of system. So, yeah, I kind of am leaning that he goes back to Buffalo. I hope not for, James Cook. But I think kind of regardless, even if he leaves, they're going to add somebody else to pair with James Cook. So it's not going to be the James Cook show as much as we would all hope so. But, yeah, I think he'll join some sort of rotation on a pretty cheap deal. One other guy, that I wanted to just touch on really quick, but I kind of think he's going back to his team as well. But a team that we've mentioned is Carolina. I think Dante Foreman's really interesting. He's kind of bounced back in his career. I think that he will end up back in Carolina with a couple other backs, but I think he kind of cemented his value there, and I think they're going to hold on to him.
Yeah, I definitely agree there, and I think there's a high chance. It took 5 years. Finally showed some burst after the Achilles injury 4 or 5 seasons ago. So I was happy to see that. Yeah. Let's move on to wide receivers and tight ends. We can get through these very quickly. And I want to start at the top of the list. The only one anybody really cares about, because he's the only one that's going to get a contract above $12.5 million a year, and that's Jacoby Myers, who really just hasn't been used the right way in New England because they've never really utilized one true guy in many, many seasons. But Jacoby Myers, who profiles as a guy who can be a high-end wide receiver too. He's got really soft hands, and obviously all the way since he joined the Patriots as an undrafted free agent. And I think that he's a really, really good player, plays the middle of the field really well, slot-heavy receiver, but can definitely be a guy who is an 85 catch, 900 plus yard guy, and that can get in the end zone as well. So what do you think about him there?
Oh, I love Jacoby Myers. Yep. I mean, he's on all my dynasty teams. I had so much of him in best ball last year. I mean, I hate to be that because I'm wrong on plenty of things as well. But Jacoby Myers was somebody that I'm happy and I'm proud of that I was right on for a while, and he still goes so late. I mean, you can look at any of my tweets. I always tweet about Jacoby Myers being a late round value because he still goes off the board as wide receiver 40, wide receiver 50, and he finished as a wide receiver 2 last year, borderline wide receiver 3 last year. So, he's a really good player. And I think people actually kind of miss that he's not just a guy who's a high floor or whatever, that's kind of the team that he was on. It was an offense that didn't really give him that much to work with, but I really think he's a talented player. He's got good size for a slot guy too. He's 6'2". I mean, he's not some little, full slot. I mean, he can do a lot of different things, I think. Right. So I'm interested in where he's going to go because I am so highly invested. I think the Chiefs is an interesting option for him or the Bears. I think that the Bears should be considering a lot of things, clearly, whatever they can do to move back in the draft. If they can get some more capital, if they're going to draft
they got a ton of cap space.
Sure, if they're going to draft a wide receiver too. But I think that it kind of comes up as, it's such an easy, lazy thing to do. But it's last year the Jags had all that money. They had trouble bringing guys there. They, got Christian Kirk, gave him that big contract. Christian Kirk was also a guy who was a little bit better than I think people gave him credit for beforehand. He was not good enough for that contract necessarily at that time. it was a pretty surprising contract for Christian Kirk to get. I think we can all agree with that. And not saying that he doesn't deserve it now, but I think at that time it was a little surprising to everybody. And then he showed that he really is, that type of player. He's a very good player. That's kind of what I'm saying with Jacoby Myers. Is I think the number right off the bat might surprise people. And then you'll see him in a role where he's utilized a little bit more like Christian Kirk and say, oh, wow, this guy's actually, a lot better than we thought he was now that he's used this way. So I think the Bears is, kind of the top option for him. I've been kind of thinking they could make a move for Chris Godwin as well. So if that's in their, if that's in their mind, I don't think they're going to go after Jacoby Myers, but I don't really know if Chris Godwin's available. It's just, a thought. So right. I think the Bears or the Chiefs are the two main options where I think Jacoby could end up. I saw a report today that the Chiefs are pretty much looking to bring back like their same wide receiver core, with Juju and MVS and have Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney. And so I guess we'll see really how much Jacoby Myers costs, because if they're actually going to do all of that, I don't know if they're going to go spend big money on Myers after seeing what they could do last year with that same receiving core. Wasn't a problem for them, unfortunately. So yeah, those are some of the options that I think you could go. I would also throw the Lions in there. I think the Lions are kind of an interesting team to make a move for a receiver. So
yeah, the Lions are interesting as well. I mean, the Lions, seem like they're poised to take advantage. They got $22.5 million in cap space for the 2023 season. So it should be interesting to see what they do there. I think Jacoby Myers is an absolute, he should go to a team that's contending, but I do think the Bears should throw a bag at him because he's like clearly the best receiver on this market. I think they throw a bag at two guys. I think they throw a bag at Jacoby Myers, and I think they throw a bag at oh God, why am I blanking on the name right now? God, they throw a bag at Darius Slayton or DJ Chark. Both guys who can stretch the field and is a sorely needed position in the Bears offense. So they have a big guy covered. The reason I didn't say Allen Lazard is because I think they have that covered with Chase Claypool. And I think they realize there's not a Chase Claypool in this class. Otherwise, I think they're pretty much just writing off the fact that they sent a literal first round pick for Chase Claypool as like, well, he's here. We got to use him now. And it was always going to, take some time for him to get acclimated into that offense. So I think they do go over and throw a bag at a guy like DJ Chark, who's shown he can be a 1,000-yard receiver in the NFL. Going back to guys like Juju, you obviously said, the Chiefs are looking to run their entire wide receiver core back. I think Juju is definitely also going to stay there. I'd be shocked if he really goes anywhere else at this point, because he just doesn't look like the receiver that we saw in Pittsburgh for 3 or 4 years. And I think the Chiefs make sense for him. It's a place where he doesn't have to be the best player on the team, because Mahomes makes everyone look good, and he can go there, and he's not going to cost too much money, and he still has a great chance to win. So I think in terms of what's best for him, the Chiefs make a lot of sense. Lazard is interesting because to me, the question is, does the team pay Lazard to be a blocking wide receiver, since he's pretty clearly the first or second best blocking receiver in the NFL? Or do they pay him to catch the football, something that he's been able to do, but just doesn't have like a vast experience doing, in his career in the NFL? So for you, where does Allen Lazard, rank in this class as a guy that you would love to have for your fantasy team?
I would never say I love to have Allen Lazard personally. Okay. I think he's a serviceable player. I think that he's also a little bit more valuable to. I think he was more valuable when he was in Green Bay, and he's with Aaron Rodgers, a guy that he had a connection with, a guy who trusted him, and they were close. I'll be really interested to see where he goes. I don't think that anybody's going to be signing Allen Lazard with the idea that he's going to be, like you said, some sort of like target hog for them. I think he's going to be a part of an offense. It's a good red zone threat. And I don't know. I mean, some of those same sort of teams, if they maybe miss out on some other guys, or maybe one of these teams, like a Houston who has like a ton of money and is going to add a quarterback, maybe like he goes there. I'd be interested to see that with Juju too. I kind of think Juju is similar to kind of what I was saying about Jamal Williams, where he's almost more valuable to the Chiefs than he is really anywhere else, because like I do think he's fallen off a little bit talent wise, and it worked out for them well enough where I think Juju's just more interested in winning and continuing to win. I mean, he's been a total asshole since he won, so I think he's just trying to win a little bit more.
Fuck Juju.
Yeah, dude, I'm so done. I'm so done with Juju. But I think he's more valuable to the Chiefs, and I think that they're probably just going to bring him back on a pretty team-friendly deal. Allen Lazard, yeah, I'm interested to see, but I'm not necessarily that turned on by Allen Lazard. DJ Chark, who you did touch on a little bit, he's 26 years old, not 27 yet. He's actually, a good player. He's had some success. I also think he's just more valuable football-wise than he is fantasy-wise to a team. So I do think he's going to surprise.
Yeah, he blocks well. He's a good blocker.
Yeah, well, he's just he just spreads the field too. I mean, you always have to, be aware where he's at. He's 6'4" and runs like a 4.3. So he's very interesting, and I do think he's actually going to get more money than people think. He's going to be kind of a surprising one, where he's just a good signing, and I'll be interested to see where that ends up. And then what about Robert Woods? Do you think Robert Woods is going to end up anywhere? Or do you think it's kind of dwindling
he's
down?
going to be 31, so wherever he ends up is going to be team that's paying him a lesser deal. He's not going to get a $14 million deal like he did to go to the Rams again. So
what about a team like Seattle? Could you see him go to Seattle?
I could definitely go, and that fits entirely into what I was saying earlier in the show, is that Seattle is a team that's willing to push all its cards in. And despite the fact that it looked like Woods lost a little bit of a step last season, I think he's still an asset to a team just because he's a crafty route runner. He's a veteran presence in the locker room. Seattle's a young team. Look, they got a bunch of guys with big personalities and young. The entire offensive line is young. DK Metcalf's young. Ken Walker's young. They're gonna. If they bring in a young quarterback this year, he'll be young. So it's perfect opportunity to mentor that group. And he and Tyler Lockett would do a great job, and that would become one of my favorite wide receiver rooms.
It feels like such a great culture fit, with him go to Seattle, have get DK Lockett.
He's also just a good guy.
Seems like a very fun thing. And I hate to make the, easy connection, but it's, the USC Robert Woods, Pete Carroll connection too. And he's kind of dwindling down in his career, so I feel he's going to want to finish somewhere where he's going to feel like he's having a good time. And I think he's a good culture fit in Seattle.
Absolutely. Let's move on to the tight ends and get them really done really quickly. Evan Engram, we're going to touch on him, just briefly because he got tagged. Big shocker. Nobody saw that coming. Least of all us who said it on the show last week. Engram immediately slots back in as a top 10 tight end. He finished, I believe, as tight end 7 this past season, and he's gonna do what he did again with the Jags. Best spot for him. And real quick, if you want to say anything, I know you already said a bunch last week, but
I like Evan Engram. I think it's a great fit for him to, just stay in Jacksonville, connected to Trevor Lawrence and with Doug Peterson. That's what we really talked about before. Doug loves his tight ends. He's great at utilizing them, and he proved that year one with Evan Engram. And Evan Engram's, 28 years old, I believe. Maybe going to be 29 before the season, but that's really not that old, for a tight end. Travis Kelce's had a lot of success deep or into his mid 30s, and not Travis Kelce, but I think Evan Engram's going to made a good decision by just going back to Jacksonville.
Yep. And then the two other tight ends that I have written down here, Dalton Schultz and Mike Gesicki. Schultz is the interesting one, has had a pretty decent career in Dallas. They're not going to re-sign him. If they didn't place the franchise tag on him again today. I just think that Schultz is going to go somewhere. He's going to make, a relatively decent amount of money for a tight end, and he's going to put up decent numbers because that's just what he does. He's a very good route runner. He's a very solid mover, and he's not going to do anything crazy to wow you athletically, but he's not going to let you down either. He's a guy with very sure hands, and he can be a red zone weapon for a team with a need at the position.
Yeah, I think looking at it on the surface, this would sound like surprising, to some people, and I don't think it will to you. But I'm more interested in Mike Gesicki than I am Dalton Schultz. I just feel like he's actually, he's a better athlete. I typically like to, lean towards, some of the more athletic tight ends. And I just feel like Mike Gesicki was so just misused in Miami. I think we all kind of knew that. And he still flashes at times, but I think we all kind of knew last year it wasn't going to be a great fit there. It really wasn't going to work, and it didn't. But I think that he has a chance to, kind of revive his career as well. And I think that again, the NFL is going to see that. I think, they're not looking at just the fantasy numbers. They're going to be like, okay, well, we can use him differently than he was used there, and he can make an impact. What are some of the teams that you think Dalton Schultz or Mike Gesicki could go to?
Ooh, it's a good question for me. Like I'm trying to think of what teams need at that position, and it's just the Bengals. Feel like a place where you could see a tight end like that go.
Yeah, Hayden Hurst, a free agent.
Yep. The Ravens always like tight ends. Just kidding.
I could see too, like I said, with kind of Houston or some of these teams that are going to be, drafting a young quarterback like that. It wouldn't be bad to get him a safety blanket at tight end. I mean, I like Brevin Jordan. I know you like Brevin Jordan too, but I don't know if he's going to stop them from signing somebody else. So
right.
I think one of those teams that has a lot of money and a hole at the position.
I also think the Packers are an option. As a team that could sign a tight end. I also think the Bears could just go and sign a tight end as well. I mean, Cole Kmet really hasn't lived up to the lofty standards that every single fantasy analyst in existence set for him when he was drafted a few years ago. And I think he's underwhelmed to the point where we could see the Bears take a swing there. And again, they just have endless amounts of money this offseason. The Lions could also be an option there. They have some money still. And I think this also goes for Mike Gesicki. And I see his market. I also see his market being a little bit better than Dalton Schultz's in terms of the fact that teams are going to see that he's, an ultra athletic guy. They'll let him block, of course.
Yeah, I almost feel like
the question will be, really, does a team pay him to catch the ball?
Yeah, I almost feel like the difference with the two is that Dalton Schultz, I felt, was more of a product of the system and a product of the offense, where I feel like Gesicki is more like, it was a detriment to him, the offense that he was in, just in terms of the way that they used the tight end. And so I think that, it's kind of interesting in that way. So it'll be, between those two is probably the second option at the position.
Yep, absolutely. But that is it for us here tonight over at High Floor Football. Jay, why don't you go on and tell everyone where they can find you, and what you're doing these days?
Yeah, you can find me at JArst, right there, first and last name. I'm doing a lot of dynasty drafts, doing a lot of best ball drafts. I'm all in the draft streets, doing a lot of rookie mock drafts. So, if you're ever, following me, looking at my page, I'm looking for people for rookie mocks a lot of the time as well. I really like doing those, and we're going to run one next week as well. So we're getting all the practice we can.
Yep, absolutely. And, obviously for me, I'm Sam Wagman. You can find me on Twitter at Swagman95. All my stuff over at Vegas Insider and Football Guys. But, check us out next Tuesday. We will be, live streaming a Dynasty rookie mock with our guy, Kevin Coleman from Football Guys. So keep an eye out for that. And real quick, Jay, before we head out of here, where do you see Lamar Jackson landing for the 2023 season?
Baltimore.
Interesting.
At this point,
I say Atlanta.
Okay.
And with that, we will leave you and see you guys on the flip side. Have a good night.